CTSI here at University Park, and I'd like to thank you for joining our, what's it called today? It's the translational topics at 12.
There we go.
Very good. But before we get started, we wanted to remind you of an upcoming CTSI event, which you can see on your screen here. On Friday the 7th, the Study Finder implementation team will join us for a webinar to demonstrate the second phase of this tool. It'll take place from noon to 1, and the registration is available on the CTSI website. If you're not familiar with this tool, this opportunity, this is a website that allows users to quickly and easily search research studies at Penn State. The phase 2 of Study Finder will integrate the CATS IRB system, the Human Subjects Review System, that includes studies available through Penn State so that individuals who might want to participate in research can easily find a study that is relevant to them. So faculty can put, or students can put their study onto Study Finder so that people can find the study and participate, or it'll automatically upload through the CATS IRB system. But today, it's our pleasure to have Dr. Janice Penrod, whom everyone knows and loves here at University Park, to talk about when CITI training does not fit, alternative research ethics training for community partners. She's going to share with us how a need for a community engagement developed into a brand new approach to training research partners. We're going to ask Janice to speak, and then we'll have a few minutes for discussion. Let's see. If people are on the phone, please mute yourself now. Then you can unmute yourself or type in questions when you have those for Janice. The presentation will be recorded and available on CTSI's YouTube channel. Thanks, Janice.
Thank you. So the purpose of today's talk is to discuss how this need was identified and how we developed approaches to resolve the challenges that we were facing in community engaged research. So I'd like to just give a caveat to those of you who are accessing this talk via recording. The scene of community engaged research is changing nationally and here at Penn State. So what we talk about today is accurate as of March 2017, but by fall of this year, there might be something new happening. So your primary access for information related to community engagement is the Community Engagement Research Core of the CTSI. If you don't know who the people are, just contact Dee or anyone at Hershey, and they'll put you in contact with the right people who are experts in community engagement and can provide updates for current events. In today's talk, I'd like to start with an overview of community engagement so that we're all on the same page. To those of you who have heard me speak previously, I'm sorry for the repetition. I want to move then into a description of some of the issues that were identified by community engaged researchers surrounding ethics training. I'll tell you about the process that we employ to actually address these changes, the solution that we came up with, and then we'll talk a little bit more about new challenges and have some time for discussion at the end. So moving directly into community engagement so that we're all on the same page. There's been a major transition, especially with the emphasis on translational research, to begin to engage the users or consumers of our innovations earlier in the process. We know for a fact that in terms of dissemination of innovations, the earlier we engage those people who are targeted by the innovation, the greater the likelihood of developing a scalable product that will have a sustained impact. So now we're beginning to think that we need to engage community partners quite early in the process. It's recommended that we bring in community partners as we begin to conceptualize a project to make sure that the conceptualization is addressing the significant issues faced by those who are living with the condition, dealing with the practice change, etc. So the old form of research that we did with communities is now referred to often as mosquito research. Our researcher would fly into a community, suck the blood out of that community, get what he or she needed, and fly away, hopefully never to be seen again by the community. Now we're looking more toward the image on the right, that the community is a complex system, many pieces, many actors in the scene. Community engagement is a process to begin to put the puzzle pieces together in a meaningful way, to make sure that the innovation that you're developing is useful to the community and will be sustained in terms of dissemination and implementation. There is an easily available reference book called Principles of Community Engagement. I have the website listed there for a free PDF download. I encourage you to download this booklet. I have one here if you all want to take a look at it. It's a great handbook. It's a very nice starting point for thinking about community engagement projects. I have cited this reference in NIH funding and in PCORI funding. It gives you very nice snapshots and assertions that can be very useful in proposal writing. So I do encourage you to take a look at it. When we think about community engaged research, the definition that's provided by this group is the process of working collaboratively with and through groups of people affiliated by geographic proximity, special interest, or similar situations to address issues affecting the well-being of those people. It's a loaded statement, so let's work through and disentangle some of the key assertions in this definition. First, the notion of community. If I ask you to name communities, you may say Hershey. You may say University Park, State College. Oh, and then there's Altoona. That's a different community. We often think geographically. The definition of community in community research goes way beyond geographic proximities. It's not a bounded geographic area in all situations. Rather, these people can be affiliated to a special interest or situation. The community may be a group of providers. It may be a group of patients who have a similar condition or an advocacy group. So when you think community, don't get stuck in a geographic rut. That's not what community means in this context. The next thing we need to think about is engagement. Notice that this says a process of working collaboratively with and through. This is very different in terms of the stance of the researcher. We're no longer thinking that we are the superior being who has the intellect to know exactly what we need from you, but rather you hold specialized expertise as a community member that will inform my research with and through. Now, this makes a lot of people quite nervous because they believe that community engagement is synonymous with CBPR, Community-Based Participatory Research. Community-based participatory research is a process through which you develop bidirectional communication and shared leadership with a group of community stakeholders. That group becomes the leadership project team. And so the researcher is no longer the only one making decisions, planning implementation, implementing the ideas, and evaluating it. It is done in tandem with community partners, and there's a bidirectionality and equality that is uncomfortable for many scientists. In fact, in CBPR, the whole process is a process of co-creation of knowledge. The researcher truly doesn't own the outcome of a CBPR project. It's held by the group, the community in which that knowledge was created. So you'll see scientific publications with community members as co-authors. Totally appropriate, recommended. So community engagement is not CBPR, but that's one level of it. And in the handbook that I shared with you, this chart is listed. There's a whole continuum of considerations of how we may engage communities in our research. On the lowest level, outreach is still rather unidirectional. The researcher is involved with the community, but primarily in informing the community. So the whole way to the right-hand side of this model, shared leadership is more of a participatory action research approach. CBPR is a form of participatory action research. But notice there are lots of steps in between. So one of the first considerations as a researcher thinking about engaging a community is to think very carefully about the degree of involvement of the community. And as you begin to think about the degree of involvement, that will help inform your policy, your procedures, your interactions with the community, and your expected outcomes. So clearly, community engaged research and community engagement is based on principles over methods. You could use varied designs across that continuum. But more importantly, there are particular principles that should be considered as you think about community engaged research. The interesting thing about this process is that these principles apply before you engage the community, the whole way through after the project ends. So before engaging the community, it is incumbent upon the researcher to think about goals, the purpose, and the targeted community segments. Simply put, you need to do your homework before you engage a community in your research. And how do you do that? You want to know a bit about the culture, the history of research, norms and values of the targeted community. This is a really important phase of research so that as you begin to build a community network, you're targeting the right people. You know why you're in that particular community and some unique aspects of it. In the illustrations across the bottom, you're figuring out the puzzle pieces. Once you begin engagement, this is an active process in the research process during which you're thinking in terms of stakeholders. Who are the players that influence the phenomenon of interest? And that's who you're trying to identify. I typically do a relatively formal stakeholder analysis and think about the informal and formal power, the influential individuals in this context. Next thing we need to do is build relationships. This takes time. Community engaged research is often marked by frequent community presentations, going to meetings, meet and greet kind of things. You need these types of relationship building occurrences or interactions to build trust. Trust is a critical factor in these relationships. But in this first phase, what you're trying to think about is how to mobilize the community of interest. And again, we're not talking about a city or a town in every situation. It could be a community of providers. Respect the collective self-determination of the community is really important. You as the PI or lead researcher will not be calling all of the shots. In community engaged research, the whole emphasis is on letting and allowing and providing venues for your community partners to help inform the research. So the third bullet comes into play. You have to be prepared to relinquish some control. And that is really difficult for many of our colleagues. The notion of control over a research project with community, we expect flexible dynamic adjustments. Now you may think to yourself, NIH and other major funders are never going to go for this. You have a protocol, you implement the protocol, you don't deviate from the protocol. And I'm here to tell you, I have had a participatory action research project funded with little direction, but good planning, and it was funded by NIH. It was an R01 project, and I can tell you, we didn't know what the outcome would be. We didn't even know exactly what questions we were going to ask. If it's a well-written proposal and well-applied methods, this is certainly fundable with a flexible, dynamic approach. The other thing about community engagement is, think of that mosquito, you don't leave when it's over. It's a long-term commitment, typically, to the community. As a researcher, I think this is really a strong point. You developed a network, you've accessed that network, you've built relationships, and you can go back to them for subsequent projects. Sustainability is a really big issue with community engagement. The goal is not to take what you need from the community, give them a little token as an incentive and then leave, but to stay engaged with this community. But should you be thinking that at the end of the project, it's the end, the third bullet comes into play. Plan a graceful exit. And you should be thinking at the beginning of the project or midpoint in the project, when it ends, how will this go down? I have used things like a celebration of accomplishments as our final hurrah, where the products are shared, the community is jazzed up, and they go back to do their thing. We can use community forums where the larger community and our partners all share together, or we could use community targeted communications. And a note on dissemination. It is recommended that 3 levels of dissemination should be considered in community engaged projects. 1 scientific report to the funder, 1 direct report to your community partners in a language that they understand, and the 3rd one is a community-based publication. So sometimes we use association newsletters in a geographic community, the local newspaper, but you should think in terms of level. Individuals with whom you've collaborated closely, the funder, as well as the community at large. So if you think about this process, it is challenging. In fact, one of the challenges to the process is the investment in the pre-project and post-project work, which often yields a recommendation that community engaged research may not be the best way for junior faculty in particular to launch a research career. It takes a well-positioned, unique junior researcher to be able to use community engaged research well and meet the requirements for tenure and promotion in a large university. So it's somewhat of a caveat to keep in mind. So we're ready to go, but we automatically hit a challenge here and in many other institutions doing community engaged research. We have these partners. We want to engage them fully. But the training and IRB approval is required for research activities, particularly if the partners are going to be involved in recruitment, consenting, and access to data. We know that CITI training is the usual approach to this type of training requirement. But we've tried to do CITI training with community partners, and it is, to say the least, difficult. There are several solutions that have been shared. One team brought everyone to campus, asked them to come to campus and put them in a room with a computer where an RA was available to help them. And I'm telling you, people have difficulty from signing on forward. It's not just the content and the delivery method, it's the entire process that has been challenging. Another team had IRB approval to send a research assistant into the community to work side by side on a laptop for CITI training. Others of us who have office space with community partners, they access the office, we just put them in there and hope they can get it done. And often they're on paid time while they're working through this CITI training. It's really a time-intensive and it's really a costly procedure. But even more importantly, we have built trust, built relationships, brought these people in as equal partners, and the first thing we do is give them a task that makes them feel out of place, makes them feel as if I might not belong here. So my biggest concern, honestly, is philosophically, beyond the operational details of getting CITI training done. So in 2015, facing this challenge and knowing that it was going on, I decided to take a community approach to solving the issue. And so the problem solving that I'm going to share with you now, if you don't remember anything else from this talk, I hope you realize that each of us has the authority and perhaps the responsibility to use this type of an approach to resolve issues or challenges that we know we're sharing with other researchers. And so put that in the back of your minds that, you know, it's easy to throw up your hands and say, just can't do it, CITI's a problem. But it's really incumbent upon us to begin to find solutions. So this is how we did it. The first thing we needed to do was identify issues and solutions and then formulate recommendations. So we'll walk a little bit through this process to let you know where we ended up. First of all, I used the standard approach to thinking about this as a community problem. In community engaged research, it's not at all uncommon to have 2 levels of boards. One is a community advisory board. These are consumers, users, and they're the type of people who can help us inform critical issues and help us understand the state of the problem or issues that we're trying to resolve. In this case, my community advisory board consisted of Penn State folks, active researchers who are engaged with the community, representatives from the ethics arm of the CTSI, reps from ORP and HSPO, aka the IRB folks, and RAs who had worked in the field with community partners to achieve CITI training. The second level that we often include in community engaged projects is an expert advisory board. These are different folks. These are people who have the expertise in design, analysis, and sometimes content. So we thought about this as our second layer board, and in this one we reach out to our CTSI colleagues at Pitt, Virginia Commonwealth, and University of Illinois, Chicago. Now, you might think, yeah, you probably knew people in each one of those areas, so it was an easy phone call. And I can tell you, I didn't. Some of them were cold calls, you know, where you call up and talk to with the right individual and just say, I see what you're posting on the web. How are you handling this? Others, as you'll see in a moment, were contacts that were facilitated through the Penn State group. So we talked a lot about issues, and the issues that I summarized earlier pretty much hit the mark. And we began to look at what was available in terms of products or solutions to address this need. Our group determined that one-size-fits-all approaches weren't ideal. In looking at the available products, one of the key features that we thought really made a product much more valuable to the Penn State community was a customizable approach. In other words, I could finesse a program or a presentation or a product to meet the needs of my research. So if my community partners were not involved in recruitment or informed consent, I could cover the principles, but really hone in on those areas in which they would be involved. Our ORPH-SPO partnerships were essential. I naively thought if we came up with a product, we could say, hurrah, here it is. And these partners informed us to kind of step back and think, you configure the product, but what are we going to do with it? How will it work here at Penn State? And so they really made us and helped us focus on processes for implementation. Their partnership was invaluable. So as we scanned the market, there were products that started to emerge, and we knew our CTSA partners were behind some of these products, so we tapped into them for their expertise. And as I mentioned earlier, this included cold calls to individuals we thought might be interested, as well as networks that already existed. And finally, we knew that the CTI expertise and endorsement was critical to this process. The lesson that I learned from this is to make sure to think about the credibility of your recommendations. We had a great team, we had great partnerships, but I can truthfully say that I think the credibility that was added by the CTSI endorsement was really important to this process. And so think about, as you think about a problem-solving approach, where is the authority, power, credibility in the organization that could provide an endorsement for your strategies that would make a difference? For us, it was the CTSI. So the solution that we identified is called CPRET. We reviewed several different products. There was a long list of them. And University of Pittsburgh CPRET product we thought was the best fit. It stands for Community Partner Research Training. Key points are it guides researcher-led RCR, responsible conduct of research for community partners. This was really nice for us because we really thought that the PI could guide the tailored, customized training of community partners for the project. So this was really a big plus for us. It put the responsibility into the PI's hands, which gave you a little bit more control. This is one area of control that you had in how this training would take place. It is customizable. It is project specific. So there are interactive exercises that are planned that you can customize directly to your protocol, to the role of the community partner. It is a well-developed product. When we first started using it, it was brand new on the market. We found it to be engaging. There are interactive exercises that, having implemented it, people love it. And it was free. That was a very important consideration. So it is available at no cost. So I'd like to protect the integrity of our system and tell you, here's the URL to access CPRET. If you go there, it's going to look just like this. only on your own desktop. I'm not going to scroll through this, but on your time, if you want to take a look at this, this is a very comprehensive website. They give you forms for confidentiality. They give you a template for a certificate. They give you the slides. They give you the talking points. It's a really comprehensive kit. And so it provides the materials that a PI would need to plan this type of training for his or her community partners in a tailored fashion. So when you have a moment, do take a look at this. It really is a very nice product. Our group determined that this was the best product on the market, and having gone back and looked at other products, I would still assert that that is true. For our needs, this product is perfect. So we developed the procedures, we made formal recommendations, we got CTSI endorsement, and we handed things over to ORP and HSPO. And what we've decided to do, next step was to implement a pilot test, or pilot projects with the CPREP product. It has been used both at Hershey and at University Park. I used it in the last month or so with the Community Advisory Board on my current project. And our insights and evaluation have been very similar. The supplemental materials provided in the CPREP kit were very helpful. They give you a slide deck that you can customize. I added some pictures. I added some different, things to brighten them up a little bit. But the slide deck gives you the structure that you need to know that you're hitting the key points. The materials were easily adaptable. The slides were on a nice clean template that made it very easy to switch things around, reorder some things to meet your own needs without any issue. I have to say this presentation was very well received by the Community Advisory Board. I have to go into these things thinking, I'm not sure how this is going to fly with this Community Advisory Board. They really liked it. A lot of what we know about the protection of human subjects is a mystery to our community partners. And when they begin to see how critically important human subject protection is in our research and how much attention we pay to it, it's often very enlightening to these folks. There are interactive activities that we're engaging. In my study, these folks are not doing informed consent. They're not processing consent. But it's important that they know the principles of informed consent that we will apply in the study. And so we did some role playing of good informed consent and not so good informed consent. In fact, it was absolutely awful where the research came in, said, would you sign this form? Thanks very much. And, the role playing was very well received. We did the little enactment and asked them, what principles did you see at play? What principles were violated? I was honestly surprised at how many principles those people retained and could feed back to us. We gave them certificates of completion. And again, never underestimate the value of a piece of paper that says it's a certificate of completion. These are highly valued currency among many community partners. So we encourage you to continue to use those certificates. So CPREP training is something that's available. Both HSPO and ORP are aware of the product. We've had pilots at both campuses. It's important for you to know this is PI-led, which means that when you think about implementing this program, the first thing you do is talk to your HSPO ORP representative about what it is you'd like to do. They don't review your slide deck. They don't ask you about how long it's going to take. There's not a lot of detail to this. It is the PI's responsibility, and you complete a summative report, an evaluation report, and submit it. But it's not onerous. The second thing about this is that the training is project specific. So your community partners on your specific project are approved from a human subjects, their training is approved, I should say, but it's not transferable to other projects. So a community partner can't say, I already did this with Penrod, I don't need to do it with you, because Penrod's approval is only good for Penrod's project. The point at the bottom is really important, though. The projects vary on the degree of community engagement, those levels that we talked about. So it's really important to discuss the feasibility of using this training with your representative before you get too deeply into the process. but it should be applicable in many situations which are quite challenging now. As you think about CPRET and your implementation of this type of training is appropriate for all levels of community engagement. Now remember that continuum. Whether you are working with the community on lower levels of engagement to complete engagement, this training could be useful. I think it's really important that your partners understand your concerns for the protection of human subject. It builds trust. So whether or not they're actively engaged in research processes or more on the fringes, I would still use this product just to let them know and help them become more aware of your careful consideration of the protection of human subjects. So feasibility, talk with your reps and make sure you have this, the approval to proceed before you go too far with this. The next catch in this, though, is that all of your duly trained partners typically don't need to be added to your IRB protocol unless they meet the definitions of individuals engaged in research. So an example would be that my community advisory board that just received this training are not listed on an IRB protocol because they will only be working with de-identified interpretation of de-identified data. And so they don't need to be listed as an individual engaged in research. So because you train 20 people does not mean that you need to add 20 people to an IRB protocol. So all of this was going swimmingly, and we thought we had the whole world conquered. And then in September of 16, NIH decided that good clinical practice would be required as of January 2017. Quote, on all funded investigators and staff who are involved in the conduct, oversight, or management of clinical trials. So they use this term staff, and they define clinical trial staff as those who are responsible for study coordination, data collection and management, and define the tasks as recruitment and enrollment, consistent implementation, and compliance. Well, our community partners are often involved in recruitment and enrollment. So we have a new little challenge on our desk. The Penn State approach to GCP training, as explained to me by one of their officers, is that the HSPO requires GCP training for investigators on all non-exempt human research studies. It's a pretty wide net. University Park ORP is requiring GCP for studies that meet the NIH's definition of a clinical trial and are funded by NIH. But regardless of which campus you're sitting in, GCP is around the corner and may pose some issues for us in community engaged research. I'm sure most people in this room have taken good clinical practice modules training as well as CITI. My RAs like GCP was more onerous than CITI training. I would tend to agree. So what would this do to our community partners? I'm not sure of the feasibility. So the question arises, is a community partner-friendly approach needed to address GCP training? Communities of community engaged researchers are thinking about this. I talked with a PCORI officer thinking, hey, maybe they're going to solve this problem that we're facing. They're aware of the problem. They think that by 2018, they'll be ready to think about it. So I don't think there's anything around the corner there. I know other CTSIs are grappling with this. I have searched high and low and have found no products, no leads that somebody's working on a community partner version of good clinical practice. So it's an opportunity for someone in this group to think about organizing a community of people who are interested in this issue, if it is an issue, and move forward with developing a training. For which one may be able to find funding for such a project, just in case that's of interest to you. But, the thing about this GCP issue is, number one, we have to determine, is this an issue that needs to be addressed? How wide is the issue? Are community partners involved in clinical trials to an extent that they require GCP training? Given our definitions at Penn State, I believe this will become a challenge. I have not seen it in my own work to date. So think about that possibility as an opportunity for perhaps someone sitting in this audience today. What we know is that community partnerships, community engaged research takes time. It takes an investment. It takes very strategic efforts. This isn't just a making friends opportunity with community partners. This should be strategic and very purposeful. Higher levels of community engaged research may not be the best strategy for junior researchers, and I mentioned this earlier, but think it warrants your attention. The big question for junior folks on a tenure track is, can you make the required investment to build and sustain community partnerships while establishing your program of research to meet P&T expectations? It's a big question for your consideration. And finally, do you have the needed expertise to facilitate community coalitions? This takes a special breed of a facilitator to create equality, to understand how introducing yourself as Dr. Penrod to a community group probably isn't wise. I become Janice with my partners, and they become first name. You have to strip yourself of titles, of power distribution, etc. It takes a special approach and special expertise. And finally, remember that the Community Engagement Research Core of the CTSI is here for you and will provide individualized consultation. So if you're thinking about community engagement, if you're trying to implement it, if you're having problems with it, they're your friends. There are experts there who are available to help you as you move along. So on that note, well, good, we went through relatively quickly. We still have time for any discussion or questions that you may have. Stop sharing. Oh. Okay. Any questions?
I have one. Janice, I'm at the kindergarten level for this topic. And you know I do adolescent research. Are there examples of community participatory with adolescents or even children?
For community engaged research, I can say a definite yes. The PCORI conference had several exemplars of working with adolescents. In terms of CBPR as a particular approach, I'm sure there are, but I could not give you references at this point in time.
Yeah, I would think that specificity would be a little trickier.
But considering methods and approach to design, adolescents of a certain age have the intellectual capacity and commitment that they could certainly process that type of a role.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
I wonder, we were just comparing notes that the Prosper project, I don't know, I mean, it was pretty community participatory.
Yes.
I mean, the engagement was with, you know, the parents, the youth were on the board, there were organizations. I mean, so it wasn't as though the youth were developing their intervention, and they did a manual approach. So they required that an evidence-based approach be implemented. And I don't know, would that be consistent with CPBR principles?
It's consistent with community engagement for sure. I avoid equating community engaged research with CBPR very purposefully. Because in my world, CBPR is a definitive approach / design / method. And so one could do community engaged research using approaches of PAR, community-based participatory research. And they've both been done. Other questions? We have 4 students in this room. Other questions?
There's a lot of them. I don't really know what's happening or what any of this is about. I would say I'm at like a preschool level.
Welcome. Any questions from any of you?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, thanks for being here.
Do you think the CPRET type platform could be modified to and develop into something that would handle the clinical practice
for GCP? I think CPRET provides a model for considering GCP in a very similar way. kind of switch out the content.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, they
I think
kind of have a platform and built.
Yes,
Maybe there's a set of modules or content that could be,
adapted in a very similar way to meet the requirements. Yes, indeed. So these, CPRED is delivered in a group setting. And so it's a really nice section or a segment of an agenda with Community Advisory Board. And I don't know that I mentioned that strongly enough. The beauty of this delivery system is you get everyone together and you get it done all at one time. Signed, sealed, and delivered, ready to go. Next part of the project. So if GCP could be adapted in the same way, what a beautiful thing it will be.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Do you know if the developers of CPRED are aware of this issue, the NIH issue? Because maybe they find it an interesting thing to take on.
Last conversation, which has not been extremely recent, duly aware,
Okay,
overwhelmed with the requirement,
Right.
and like us, see an opportunity, but I don't know of any action being taken at this
Okay.
time. But the folks at Pitt are highly collaborative. They're good people.
good.
There's a question typed
A
up.
question from
Janice,
Percy?
I had a question. If you were to, say you have a very large community, an international community, and your protocol requires that people have training, doing the sessions in person would be a challenge, but could it be done using, video conferencing or teleconferencing or something along those lines? Has that been considered or used that you're aware of?
We discussed that in our task force and in our group meetings, that should be a viable option. It has not been piloted today. I would not expect, but I could be wrong, issues with delivering via a different format. I think that would be very viable.
Okay, thanks.
Janice, this is Sarah. We have a question from Crystal from Johns Hopkins. She said, is CPRED training study specific, or could it be used for a community advisory board that serves as consultants who provide feedback to researchers from different studies?
Great question, Crystal. It is project specific. So the examples and the interactive exercises are meant to be designed around the nature of the project for which the training is offered. That being said, I think it is totally appropriate to use this training format with advisory groups who may not be directly involved in research processes and serve only as consultants, but perhaps your EAB, your expert advisory boards, just to let them know of the type of training that you're doing. But it is approved at Penn State as a substitute for CITI training for those who are identified as actively involved in research and need to be on the protocol. But I would encourage consideration of using this product as general education for other groups as well. And if Crystal is still typing, did I answer her question?
Nothing back yet, but yeah, she said thank you.
Okay, good, good.
Can you talk about the differences between good clinical practice training and CITI training, and what was the reaction of the community to both? Or did you try GCP training with your community?
I did not do GCP training with my community. By that point in time, they were determined to be not actively involved in research and did not need to go into on an IRB protocol, at which point I stepped away from GCP training. I could tell you the RAs.
Yeah.
RAs endured CITI training. They had much more difficulty with GCP.
I think that's been the general sense, is that it's much more focused on sort of the pharmaceutical type studies, so more about drugs and devices, and there's a lot of that built into some of that.
So it's
So
very
you
technical and very
You
specific.
kind of have to have a fuzzy filter around that and get the principles out around consent and documentation and so on. But I think it can be hard to sort of have that fuzzy filter.
I see.
Erin, you were an RA at the time and needed to do both trainings. Insights on GCP?
Yeah, GCP, like she said, pharmaceutical device focused. The language, you know, you can get through it, but I've never been on a pharmaceutical clinical trial, and it's just difficult. And you think CITI training's overwhelming. If anybody's done that, this is much worse. So I couldn't imagine. I mean, it would be an investment for that community member. It would be a large investment of time, and you know.
And much of it may not be relevant at all.
None of it was really relevant to what we were.
Yeah, there are like sort of these underlying principles that are relevant,
Right.
but unfortunately, the context that it's being discussed in
It's all
is
this
all
theory.
in this other area of heavy-duty clinical trials that are sort of the old-style clinical
Yeah.
trials. I think that's the problem.
Biomedical.
More biomedical clinical trials. And so it needs a user-friendly overlay at least, right?
Or
I would agree.
more generic examples.
Yeah, examples better, and the language, get out of that biopharm sort of language.
Sounds like a project.
I'll say. If there are any other questions or something comes to mind, I am at the College of Nursing. Feel free to email me, and I'll answer via email. But second take-home message that I hope sticks with you is when you think community engagement, think community engaged research core of the CTSI. That's where your friends are. That's where the experts are. And they are interested in helping you as researcher to really enhance the quality and rigor of community engaged research at Penn State. So put them on your list of folks to call because that's an easy access expert consultation that you can get without cost. That's even better. So, yeah. Last call, any other questions? Poor students are thinking, oh my gosh, she's gonna look at me again. So, thank you all for being here today and taking time out of your schedule. Hope you found something of use in today's talk. Thanks.
Thanks, Jenna.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Love the mosquito.
Yeah, I like that
that's
too.
cool.
That was really good.